Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CEP. It's fire evacuation procedure for the evening. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go downstairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. This is a webcast meeting. Can I confirm that it's on? And it will be on YouTube. Can I please ask everybody to switch off mobile phones or to put them on silent, please? Do we have any apologies for absence? No, it's just Stuart missing. There's any substitutions? No. Any declarations of interest? Are there any urgent matters? Has everybody read the minutes of meeting from the 18th of December, and are they happy with them?
Can I make one very minor edits to it? I referred to Passive House Design last CEP. Passive House Design is a standard, it's a German standard, and it is spelt Passivhaus. Just because it is a standard, I think we should address it correctly. If we could have that changed, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we can make that correction and we'll just sign it anyway. I'll sign it after the meeting. So the first item on the agenda is item 5, B-Love review. And I'll hand you over to Councillor Bound to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, CP. Very brief introduction from me. I think that the paper spells it out very clearly. It's a very significant event. It's sort of the last event of the festival in our cultural year here in the borough. I personally find it very pleasing that we've managed to increase sales by 20%. I think it's still very good that we can work with the B-Love Forum, who understand festivals and music probably better than we do. And we can also look at how we've improved the event to be more family friendly. Certainly when I joined the council, Basingstoke Live, I was advised to steer well clear of, for all sorts of reasons that residents often told us as far as safety, security, and actually antisocial behaviour. So I'm very pleased that we've turned it into a much more positive, friendly, welcoming event. As somebody that's gone to it since I've had it in my portfolio, I've certainly seen people enjoy it. We have also been very lucky with the weather. Perhaps, and certainly one of those years, less lucky with the Football World Cup on the same evening. We get lots of very positive feedback now from our community safety partners. So they're very, very positive about the work that we've done to work with them to make sure everything that should be done is done. And we're very grateful for the work that they do with us. We do use it as a showcase for artists locally. So 650 artists have performed at the event, including local bands and college bands, as well as international acts. We have the new area, which is specifically for under 12. So again, just to underline the family-friendly element of it. So there is something for everybody. And new partnerships, for example, with Queen Mary's College, as far as giving some people some work experience working on a relatively large local event. So the intention is very much to welcome your feedback, listen to comments and questions that you have, so that we can look at working with our partners to improve the event as we go forwards. And I'm going to hand over to the officers, but I know the first thing that they want to do is to show us all a 45-second video.
Good evening, committee. I just want to, first of all, just draw your attention to some of the really positive news in terms of some of our sponsors this year. This year we were able to attract £7,000 worth of sponsorship into the event, and so it was great to have some of those partners up there on board this year. In terms of our journey, we're 3 years into this journey now, and we're particularly focused on trying to refine the offer and learn our lessons year on year with the event. Going forward, we're looking at making the changes on 2.11 in the report, and I'd really like to draw your attention to the appendix as well, which gives you some of those stats and figures, which very much focused around our audience development plan going forward. And it's great to be working with the Arts Council England's Audience Finder platform, which really gives us an insight into who's attending this event year on year. And that's the other benefit as well of the ticket data. So I'll open up for questions in case anyone's got any questions on the report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers and portfolio holder, for the report. Just some really simple questions, really. In relation to the ticket pricing on 2.10, do you have an idea of how many real early bird subscribers paid before the end of December, and how many so far have paid up before the change in the March ticket pricing?
It's actually, it really works. What works really well is the 3-month lead-in. So going on sale sort of Christmas, you do get a few Christmas stocking fillers. But also, I would say we had about 70 tickets last year for that. But then in terms of early bird, I would say that we are reaching roughly 2% only in terms of our audience numbers. We know that we're selling 94% in the last week, which we know is weather related, but it's really nice to be able to offer that to residents.
And I just wanted to know what work had been done to go into e-ticketing. I know that we spend £1.75 for postage, but have we thought about going... and one of the things I wanted to raise was in terms of the amount we're trying to do in terms of single-use plastic. What are we doing to tackle and make Be Love a paperless festival and also a plastic-free green festival?
Sure. So the way it works is you don't have to print off your ticket with Ticket Source. You can come with it on your mobile phone. You can have a text sent to you, or you can just show your barcode online. It's emailed to you. So there's no need to bring a paper copy to the event. And just to touch on some of the sustainability work that we've done, last year we introduced the Be Love branded cups, which was an effort to reduce the plastic consumption at the event, particularly with bars. You could refill your cup. But we're also this year looking to to reduce the number of plastic bottles at the event. So we're looking at some bigger, more sustainable water outlets for bands, in particularly backstage, because the free water standpipe is used really well at the event already, and people can bring in an empty vessel to fill up at the event. We're going to make more of a thing of that this year. We're actually having some taps, so it's not just one standpipe and a long queue. So we're really working with our climate change colleagues to help us address some of the sustainability problems. I would say the events industry as a whole is really looking at how you can introduce more solar panel power to events. One of our biggest costs is red diesel.
Councillor Jones.
Chair, I've got a couple of questions. One has already been touched on, but in 2.10, Just ticket sales are done by a third party. To my mind, is that the best way? It seems rather strange that as a council we can't sell tickets, and therefore we're obviously charging people if we post them. But this does seem a little bit odd that we're not even doing it ourselves. Have we looked into this, or have I read this wrong?
Yep, we did look into this. Many years ago, we sold tickets internally for the fireworks fiesta, for example. But we did want to use a specialist that could cope with high volumes of ticket sales during the last 24 hours of the event. Ticket source are very reasonable. That 7.5% is 13p on a £3 ticket. So it's not expensive for festival goers. And what we're really hoping going forward is that we continue to be able to capture all that data from people attending the event, so we know exactly how many visitors are attending and also how many residents are attending and from which wards as well. So working with our audience finder tool and this ticket software company, we can really get an understanding of our audience, but also it relieves the pressure on the internal officers, and we're enabling someone else to do that on our behalf and doing it incredibly well, with very good service, I think.
It just seems, rightly or wrongly again, it seems to me that we're condensing stuff. Or are we doing a good thing, or are we just looking for savings? This is one of the problems I find with this council we have to look at all the time is savings instead of quality. I don't think we've got that anyway, but you got
So we're on a journey to make the event more sustainable and effective and efficient and resilient going forward. And that's not about reducing the offer at all. It's about enhancing that offer. So we're not doing away with any particular music genre. It's more about refining genres and making sure that we're reaching the new niches in the music industry, but also it's about us saving some costs in terms of infrastructure, and generally a stage is about £4,000 once you include power, a technician to run it, the marquee infrastructure and the staging, and the technology that's needed to run a stage.
And if I may just add, I think it's very obvious when you are at the event, it is over a very large area. So the current number of stages, all it currently means is it's just terribly ineffective because you have one stage at least at any one time completely empty. So it doesn't, in fact, I absolutely agree, it enhances the offer because the one criticism you could have at the moment is it's too spread out. So that you get a much better feel as a festival goer of getting that by whether you're with people enjoying the same music rather than just going, well, actually it stopped over here, so everybody's rushing over there for an hour and a half and then coming back and that stage is empty.
It's improved the trade with the food offers and that. How much money are you getting from your people selling food and that? Because the reason I ask, and I won't go too deeply into it, it's a number of years ago we were actually virtually giving it away to some of these traders just to come in. So I couldn't see it in the thing how much sort of.
Sure. The appendix sets out the income and the various streams. So 8,500 for trade and catering. It's roughly £750 per stall. And we try and make that work for local traders. So if there's particularly a business locally that we want to support, then under our economic development plan, we look to reduce the cost and take the risk away from them. But certainly for more commercial traders, catering units, then we've benchmarked that against other festivals. But what works really well is the bar income and supporting the local bars at the top of town during the summer when it's quiet, and giving them that opportunity to earn significant income in one weekend does really help them through the summer, particularly some of the businesses in London Street.
Can I just ask what stage you're going to shut down?
It's more amalgamating the stages. So the grime and hip hop is being amalgamated with the drum and bass, and the acoustic stage is amalgamated with the sort of soul, funk, reggae music. So it's about combining some of that offer, and not everything running both days. So be quite clear on the lineup, what's running each day, and there'll be no less music at the event. It's just purely about refining that offer.
Okay, and can I ask, the figures you got here, is that from your ticketing agency? So all the costs, the amount of people who are coming in and where they're coming from, that's it, that's what you get from them. Okay. Councillor Vaux, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, you know, it's great that in 3 years that this festival has improved and increased, and it's building each year. I mean, they're never easy things to do, so congratulations for that. Then there were a couple of questions, so I'll just ask them and hopefully you can remember them. Oh yeah, one other positive thing that I thought was really good is that the data telling you that there's a lot of people coming to this event who don't go to any other kind of music event, because it's quite an expensive thing to do, and it's often logistically quite difficult to get to events. So it's great that we're providing something for a lot of people who may not experience that normally. So I think that's also really, really good. So the questions that I had coming out is do we insure if the weather is very bad? So, you know, there's quite a lot of money that we've put out. Can we, or is it so expensive that it's not worth doing? What more do we do? Because the paper talks about equality, but I'm sure, I think the only thing it talked about was concessionary rates, but I'm sure that there's more that we do for people with protected characteristics. So it would be really good to hear a little bit more about that. And I was also wondering, as I read it, is our intention to keep this festival for Basingstoke residents and people who were within reasonable travelling distance, or was it our aspiration to enhance Basingstoke's reputation as an arts and cultural centre, to actually be bringing people from further afield? And if that's the case, what were we doing about that?
Well, I was going to answer the second one, if I may, whilst the officers are considering the first one. I think the simple answer is both, to be honest. I think there's something about residents understanding and being proud of the arts and cultural offer that we have and the talent that we have in this borough, and supporting those people that they know that have talent and that opportunity, because every now and again one of those will progress in a way that perhaps they and their supporters didn't expect. But also, I think picking up the arts and culture portfolio in May, there's something for me that says people outside of Basingstoke don't understand what we have got to offer, and our offer elements are strong. I think we've got a task to do to package it and market it. B-Love offers us the opportunity to do that, and also the opportunity for people to understand how great their council is. When I became a councillor, I never thought I'd be at a council meeting talking about reggae, soul, funk, grime, drum and bass. I thought I'd be talking about planning applications and all those great things. So there's a real realisation, isn't there, that says, you know, we should be able to do lots of things with it. I think there's something that probably we didn't understand, but only do now. We have the evidence that says there's something very valuable here for me when we look at the audiences that we gain, that one of the biggest audiences, and it's really evident when you stand in the middle of the Memorial Park when this event is going on, that there are groups of 16 and 17-year-olds who, at one level, their parents trust us to run an event where they are safe. And I'm sure many parents have quite a lot of anxiety when their young people are going to other events. And that those young people who are often characterised in a very negative way as perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, who behave really well, having a great time. And I think that's also an element that we should nurture.
Just to pick up on the insurance point to start off with, we actually have our annual insurance meeting this week coming up, but there are two things we can't insure about. One is the death of a senior royal if we were in mourning, so that's something that the Cabinet would have to consider, and the other is adverse weather. It has to say that at the moment the real problem for us is around the event being too hot. We've had 3 really hot summers, and I don't want to jinx this year. We're due some rain. So that may have an impact on the event. But we obviously have public liability insurance, and it's an ongoing conversation with our insurers and our underwriters about the level of the event, and also how our partner suppliers are insured as well. And it does form part of our risk register. It's the one thing that we're really clear on, and particularly around cancellation of acts as well. And then just in terms of protected characteristics, we obviously offer try and make the event as accessible as possible. So grass isn't particularly friendly for wheelchair users, but we have some raised platforms at the event, and we have what we call access stewards, which are stewards who are particularly there as a point of assistance. Carers go in free with anyone who is registered disabled, and we obviously offer a concessionary ticket entry as well, which is a 10% reduction on ticket prices. And in terms of the community area, I would say it's incredibly diverse in terms of the groups performing. So Colour the Arts are regular performers, for example, and we try and reach out to as many different groups as possible and link in, if possible, to the World Party event in Eastrop Park that happens the week before. So we're not crossing over too much, but we're working more in partnership and harmony with that event.
Councillor Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up really on the point that was made a second ago about the how we're trying to pitch this. First of all, I think it's a brilliant thing. I think it's a great idea that Basingstoke should have its own festival. But back in the days when I used to go to festivals, I do recall that the really good ones were the small family local ones. But the trouble with them over time is because they were good, they then became popular and they became too big and became not good. So I know we're not, we can't really think too far into the future at the moment because this is still early days. But one of my questions was, is there a point at which, or is it in the near future, that we should be thinking about maybe a professional agency, to a professional event running company to source the bands for us, to do all the stuff for us? Because I've got to be honest, we had a quick chat about this earlier, and not one of us could recognise any of the bands on there. I'm sure they're very good, but we weren't right there. And I would like Councillor Bound to name one band from each of those music genres that he named earlier. But I just wanted it sort of on the radar that maybe next year or at some point in the future, maybe there should be a thought about, as it grows, that maybe we should be thinking about professional event organisers and professional agents. And the second thing I wanted to understand is what we can do as councillors locally in promoting the event. And I'm not just talking about ticket sales, but I'm talking more about sponsorship packages, how if you've got any material you can give to us that we can take locally back to parish council and say, are there local companies that would like to get involved, trade stands or trades or whatever. Thank you.
Yeah, noted on that. But we can certainly send you the sponsorship pack as well. We can make sure that members have sight of that to send out. Okay, noted.
I was gonna pick up, not the challenge. Don't fear, but I think it's also it's the art of promotion, isn't it? I think there have been often cases when I've gone to the officer team and gone, who are these people? Because I want to go, but I don't, I want to understand who it is, and of course, interestingly, the conversation often goes because, we often recognise music but don't know the band that played it. So I think there's also an element of that happens certainly with the social media posts that go on, so that in some respects we try to promote the music. So somebody goes, oh yes, they're playing. You don't necessarily have to know the name. And that's how I get out of the question.
Councillor Kinnear.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to say it's a very interesting report. Sadly, I couldn't attend last year, and sadly, I can't this year. But reading about it, it looks fantastic. I've got a couple of questions. On the tickets, because obviously it's before people actually walk in the door, is it suggested that they bring their own bottle and there are refill points available, because obviously that's important before they actually get there? Secondly, I'm interested on the ticket table in 2.10, subscribers' Christmas email before 31st of December. I'm not sure how you become a subscriber for that, because obviously it's cheaper than the early bird. So I'd just be interested to know that. Thirdly, ticket sales, interesting what Councillor Mahaffey had to say as well. I would very much like to put some posters up in the rural area. I brought it up at the Parish Council meeting on Monday. There were many residents there who hadn't actually heard about it. So I think that is important. That maybe all parish councils should have an email about it or some information. I think that's important. And us as councillors, we can put it on our Facebook pages or whatever, spread the word, because I have to say I hadn't heard about it last year. The other thing I'm interested in is the wards map on page 20. It says that there was which is great, that all wards were represented. Well, being a councillor for the very northern part of the borough, I'd be interested in Headley, sort of where the boundary is for West Berks. I don't quite understand the map. Sorry if I'm being particularly stupid. But it says 0 to 43. Does that mean that Kingsclear, above Kingsclear in the ward that I'm in, there were 0 to 43 people? I don't quite understand, and I'd be very interested to know how many from the Kingsclear ward actually attended. I don't know whether that's possible.
I can certainly look into that for you. In terms of the table there, that was based on the people surveyed by the looks of things, looking at that figure there. I will just clarify that and drop you an email if I can, just on that for your particular ward on numbers, because we can do that through our postcode data. So we can definitely do that. In terms of the subscribers email, that's a loyalty scheme, because we're trying to build the loyalty of the event. So if you've booked a ticket the previous year, we wanted to be able to give them first dibs and create that loyalty for the event, and particularly if you've signed up to our newsletter on that. And then in terms of the comms, there's a great big comms plan around safety messaging in particular, and that's working with our safety partners through our safety advisory group, and we work with the council comms department to issue particularly messages around hot weather when it's particularly hot, which it was one year, and bringing an empty water bottle to refill up your water bottle. So that's all part of our comms plan.
So the map, is that information from your ticket sales company? Because what I say is that Winchester's only, well, it's not got many, neither has Farnborough or Woking, and they're major stations which really we could promote or advertise there. Has that been done in the past?
Yeah, so we have targeted some areas, particularly through Facebook advertising for some areas, but we're also really aware of what other festivals are on locally, and there is one in Winchester that's quite similar. But also it's about where the bands are from as well, because if there's a particular Reading band, for example, playing, then we might want to increase some of the marketing around that particular band. So there is no outside of Basingstoke particular promotion of particular towns, but it's a 40-mile radius on Facebook advertising that we work to.
Councillor Jones.
Second time round. Yeah, it's just what comments about it getting bigger. My fear is, and I don't want it to go the same way as balloons over Basingstoke, the fireworks, the carnival. You know, we seem to start these things off, and they've been going for a number of years, and they're very successful, and it's been successful now, which is great. But we seem to then try to walk away as a council. I want to see, I put down a marker, that we keep it within our own council. This is our event, maybe run by other people, but we need to make sure we're involved in it, because we've lost such a lot over a number of years now. It's not just us older people that remember it, but there's a lot of people out there saying, well, why don't we have a carnival? Why don't we have the fireworks anymore? You know, there was a cost to them, but it wasn't that. You know, it's something the borough had that was different to everybody else, and we've lost all that. And this is one thing I feel we should be making sure is Basingstoke and Dean Council actually running it to start with, and it's not their names up there, so I'll just put a marker down for that one.
I think that's fair to say. Noted then, Councillor Jones.
I've got Councillor Taylor next on the list. Did you want to speak? Oh no, I just saw a hand and I just thought it was. Sorry, after that was Councillor Carruthers.
Yeah, a couple of things. Simon mentioned earlier about it's really positive that we've got a lot of young people. Here it says we had 29%, 13, 17, fantastic. Really good that young people are showing an interest. It's often an age group that's under provided for in terms of culture. It says here that we're going to be having to look at an entry action plan for safeguarding to do with the fact that there were a lot of young people without adults there. And I'd be interested to know if we've got any ideas on what that might be. Obviously, it would be a shame to see that reduce the numbers of those young people attending. So that's my first question. And my second question, it's sort of a comment, sort of a question, is something I've mentioned before, and that's transport. So I noticed looking at the map that actually it was pretty low attendance from Tadley. We're 20 minutes down the road. And I wonder, is there some way we could work with the local bus companies? I mean, from a climate change perspective as well, in terms of reducing car use into the town for the event, could we have some sort of thing where we could offer a slight reduction on bus tickets into town on the day of the event? Could we buy almost an all-in-one ticket or something? Because A, that might encourage more people to attend, and B, it's less cars. So those are my two things.
I was going to answer the bus one. As somebody's had bus in their portfolio before, I think it's very reasonable to start a conversation with Stagecoach, and I would anticipate it's potentially something that would come as at no cost to us at a council. There is a reality, of course, that they're in the game of turning routes into commercial experiences. We have a new fleet of buses. Getting people on the bus for the first time to come to the festival, when perhaps they want to do something that involves having a drink and not driving, would be a great way. Tadley is a great example because, of course, Tadley probably is fortunate enough to have one of the most frequent bus services to town every 10 to 12 minutes. So again, looking at where those routes are that we could work with Stagecoach looks like something that it's really easy to have that conversation and achieve.
Just picking up on the safeguarding, which is so important to us that we get it right for this event. So following the safety advisory group debrief, we've set up a subgroup just to look at what happens when young people aren't collected from the event. And actually we've reduced the impact hugely over the years on the town centre, particularly at the end of the event, and we've introduced things like the parent pickup point, but it's about working more closely with safety partners like the police and St John's Ambulance, who just do brilliant things at our event to make sure that there are no stragglers, both inside the event footprint but also outside the event footprint, and how we can make sure that young people are well looked after. So it's a combined approach with everyone, just to make sure that we're covering all bases.
Councillor Regan.
That's just a point. And talking about the buses, I mean, there's no buses on a Sunday. I presume it's going to run on a Sunday, so they need heavy subsidy from the borough council to keep the buses running. Seeing the county are cutting bus subsidies by many thousands. Being a grumpy old man, I'm glad they got funk and soul, but grime and stuff like that, Christ the most, makes me feel old. But the other thing I was going to be in the grumpy old man mode is, what's the level of complaints about noise?
So in terms of environmental health complaints, we work really closely with environmental health on sound monitoring at the event. We write to residents within a certain radius of the War Memorial Park beforehand, so they know exactly what time the music's going off, what time the music's coming on, what time we're testing the music on the Friday night, and we also link that with the outdoor cinema as well, particularly as they tend to be musicals as well. So it's all part of our licensing that we do that. So we're working really closely with the licensing colleagues as well. In terms of complaints, under 2, I would say generally on average, over 3 triggers an environmental health officer to attend the site. But we already have a safety consultant that works with us and measures the noise volume hourly at the event, and that's all logged from every stage, and it's logged from the closest residents to some a bit far away. If we get complaints, it tends to be because of the wind, so it tends to be Chinham unusually, or Oak Ridge, not the immediate houses, but that's to do with decibels. I'm not an expert in that, but environmental health have said that there have been some complaints a bit further afield, but I don't think we've increased more than 2, certainly within the last 3 years. Other complaints we get are around access to the War Memorial Park the week of the event. So that's dog walkers mainly.
I did notice in section 5, we're talking about grumpy people. 91% of respondents think the event is good for Basingstoke's image, but only 90% would recommend the event. So there's 1% of people who like it but won't tell anyone. Councillor Cousins.
Seeing as Councillor Tilbury hasn't had a go, but I think it should be fair that those that haven't asked the question first go beforehand. Go on then. I'm disappointed Grime's getting a bit of a kicking. I'm also disappointed that Councillor Bound can't name one grime artist. You know, come on. Can I just very briefly come back to 2.11, Pictures in the Park, where we're saying we want to increase the screenings from 3 to 4. So 2 afternoon, which are aimed at younger children, and 2 in the evening, which are aimed at an older audience. Would you wish to give the committee an exclusive and advertise what those films would be? There is a captive audience on the webcast with bated breath. They'd like to know what they're going to see this year.
We work really closely with Film Bank Media, and it's in our contract that we can't broadcast that until we get the rights, and I haven't had the rights through yet, that paperwork through yet. But I think it's probably only a week away, that announcement, and it's certainly featured in B&D today, I believe.
Can I ask that we put that in as a post-meeting note in the minutes? Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got some experience of festival. We do have a small one in Overton called Car Fest, which has grown from about 20,000 to 35,000, only a mile from the village. And obviously that's brought a number of problems over things. But the obvious thing in this case, at the moment, we've sort of increased by 20% from about 5 to about 6,000, which is probably back where we were with the old Basingstoke Live, I would have thought. But is there a natural size for this? I mean, at what point would you need to go to that? You know, we know with Car Fest, every time we increased it, it causes all sorts of logistical problems, parking and those sorts of issues. You know, particularly if you're trying to attract people from further away, they're more likely to drive. At the moment, I think a lot of the audience is coming from very local, from Basingstoke. So is there a size at this point in time? Because the last thing we want to do is advertise it to people and have 15,000 people turn up and then have to turn 5,000 away or even more, you know. So that would be useful to have a bit of a feel for that.
So the park capacity is 15,000, but we work on 12 as a basis, and that's very much about working with our infrastructure partners to make sure that we have a positive impact on the town, whether that be highways, train, rail, road, in terms of buses as well, and taxis particularly as well. So we haven't gone above 7,000 people, I don't think, in the park ever, and I wouldn't want us to increase beyond that 12,000 at the event.
Councillor Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was about to withdraw my question because I think I possibly got the facts wrong here, but I think you mentioned, Councillor Bound, earlier that a couple of years ago you coincided with the football. I've just been looking at what's going. We're talking about 12th of July, aren't we? That's the last day in Wimbledon. Yeah. Would we consider putting up a big screen?
Those that remember, I had huge conversations with the police around screening the football. There were many meetings to discuss that. We are looking into how we might have a big screen at the event. The immediate worry is that actually the Euro football final would be on that Sunday evening, but it's after the event finishes, so we wouldn't be screening that. The tennis would be during the day. I think we come back to that this is one weekend of music, arts and family fun, and so it's how it doesn't interfere with that, but that's certainly something that we may consider over the course of the year.
Okay, have we got any more things to?
Can I just make one comment, Chair, if I may?
Of course you can.
I've just been doing some research because I'm not necessarily up to genres in music, but I think it's important for the committee to know that probably I'm not that big on grime, but grime did come from UK Garage, and my favourite UK Garage is So Solid Crew.
Councillor Hickling.
Thanks. So yeah, congratulations on a great 2019 festival. Very good. All of the feedback I've had from residents of Eastrop, including ones who live very close, if not on War Memorial Park, I have been very proud of the event and have been pleased so far with the way it's been implemented. So looking forward to 2020. Questions I've got. So if our attendance for 2019 was just shy of 6,000 on ticket sales, what's our target for 2020? What are we hoping to raise that to? And relating to that as well, regarding advertising, what marketing activities do we have planned? Is there a campaign ongoing at the moment? and how much are we planning on spending on that?
If I can argue the target first, I think it explains it in the paper. We're looking for 15% additional this year. And I think it coincides with the size. You know, there's something for us which is, do you know what, moderate growth of the 15-20% order year on year is something that helps us manage what we may be able to think that we can forecast what 10,000 would do for the town, but I suspect we'd rather not suddenly have that and work out that we got some of that wrong. So actually moderate increases of 15 to 20% would be where we were looking.
And just in terms of budget for marketing, we're looking at 8,800 in the appendix in the report, and that's spent across a variety of different platforms. That's online, Facebook advertising, Hampshire Now and magazine publications, as well as bus stop and train station adverts we've done previously. So it's a real mix. We try and get a lot of free advertorial in the estate magazines. So and some of that is about talking to councillors to get that. And also leaflet distributing, and the forum themselves, who hand out flyers to all the relevant bands and gigs. And Ticket Source themselves, who send an email out.
Do we have any more questions? I guess we don't need to go into debate, because I think we've already done it, really, haven't we? So just to sum up, I think I can say that everybody's happy with what you're doing, and how it's progressed from Basingstoke Live. It's good to see it's evolving, specifically on things like safety, diversity, ability to see new acts, well-known acts and local acts. We can see you making a number of tweaks and changes, and can I ask for you to come back and report on 2020? Thank you. So I should move on to item 6, care leavers and corporate parenting. Do we want 5 minutes for a change around? Yeah, we might need 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. Grab some sandwiches. Thanks for waiting, everybody. We'll move on to item 6, which is care leavers and corporate parenting update, and I'll hand you over to Councillor Robinson to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman, and firstly, apologies for my timekeeping. All complaints, please address them to South Western Railway. The item before us tonight is incredibly important and refers to how we look after some of the most vulnerable people in our borough, reference care leavers and the corporate parenting responsibilities. This piece of work stems from a committee programme request where a number of councillors wanted to understand more about the work that goes on in this area. And I think this has been a really helpful exercise, certainly for me, who's somebody still relatively new in the portfolio, to condense in one place all of the activity that's undertaken by this council and all of the activity that's undertaken with partners to understand exactly what the support offer is in this space. And that's been an incredibly helpful exercise, and that support includes council tax relief, grant funding, tailored housing support and employment skills assistance, which we can see in the report. And I'm looking forward to hearing the committee's views on the support offer included. On my left, we have Sam Charlton, who's one of our officers here, and Rachel Fletcher, who's a housing officer here, and also Kim Gardner and Mike Clark from Hampshire County Council, who'll be able to answer some of the more detailed questions that you may have. I'll hand over to Sam now to talk a bit more in detail.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. As Councillor Robinson has explained, this is in response to a committee work request, and it relates to our corporate parenting duties, and that's something that was introduced by the Children and Social Work Act in 2017. Although the primary responsibility for children in care and care leavers sits with Hampshire County Council, the guidance that's relevant to the Act does identify district councils as also having a responsibility in terms of the services that we deliver at a local level, and it's things like homelessness support and council tax, which are relevant to those individuals because those are the kind of services they're most likely to come into contact with. So what this piece of work has identified is that there is quite a bit of support that's already going on within the borough, both from Hampshire County Council and from Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. As Councillor Robinson has mentioned, the Council Tax Relief Scheme that was introduced in 2018 by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council was a really important step in terms of delivering against our responsibilities. In addition to that, we've already got concessionary rates for children in care in relation to leisure facilities, and there's a huge amount of work that goes on in this borough around social inclusion and preventing homelessness, which is also relevant to this group because it's these young people are more likely to face those kind of challenges as they go into adulthood as well. So this is very much a work in progress, and we just want to take this opportunity to seek your views on the work that's going on, and also if there's anything that you know from your experience of your wards that you think that we need to consider as we go forward with this piece of work.
Sorry, is that everybody speaking? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Westbrook.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'm really pleased to see this report on care leavers come to this committee, and I'd like to offer members a bit of background that brought us to this point. Working closely with the Children's Society, I first brought a motion to Council on providing a council tax exemption for care leavers following their Wolf at the Door campaign back in October 2017. And I recall earlier that year seeing a comment from our council in the Gazette on care leavers saying, "We don't have any specific plans to introduce these exemptions, but it's not been ruled out for the future." The motion failed to reach the floor of Council twice because of packed agendas, so I agreed to a suggestion from the then chair of EPH to go straight to committee for discussion to speed things up. We'd already missed one financial year of helping care leavers and wanted to avoid missing another. A good debate was had at EPH and a recommendation passed to Cabinet, which Council eventually approved. Basingstoke and Dean were the first of Hampshire's 11 districts to agree a tax exemption for care leavers, and only now are others beginning to follow. We should be proud of that. The reason I requested this item to be added to your work programme was the one thing that stood out from our EPH discussions was that as members, we wanted to know in our new role as corporate parents, what else could we or should we be doing? What do we already do that we're maybe not aware that we do? And could we support these young people better, some of them who turn up homeless? Members were very keen to explore these points, and I was keen to get it back on our radar, hence this report. I thank the officers both at the for here and at the county for their work in producing this report and for the support from the Cabinet Member for Homes and Families in his forward in the report. I draw members' attention to point 212 on page 34 of the report, which sets out the principles that local authorities must have regard to whenever they exercise a function in relation to care leavers. All the things as a corporate parent that we would wish to provide for our own children as they step into adulthood. As a Borough Council, there are a number of valued and important things we can do, and this report highlights many. As parents of carers, many of us help our children heading towards adulthood with financial support, the roof over their heads, and frequently their taxi service too. Perhaps then, as corporate parents, we should be exploring what we can do as a borough with regard to free or discounted public transport, which in turn would improve their ability to access services such as mental health support, GPs and dentists, etc. Public transport costs generally can be prohibitive to young people on a limited income. In addition, as the report states, we actively support young people to access employment-related training and initiative in partnerships with a range of local organisations and businesses, but we need to make sure that care leavers can get there, and support with transport costs will help. Fuel poverty is another recognised issue for these young adults stepping out on their own for the first time. So are there any options that we as a borough can explore or assist with? The report states that we could look at free or discounted leisure access. It would be interesting to hear members' suggestions on what could be explored with partners, as improving care leavers' access to positive social and leisure activity offers benefits in both physical and emotional health and helps combat social isolation. Care leavers have in the majority been exposed to adverse child experiences in their journey into care, which has exposed them to emotional trauma. As corporate parents, we can help support them. I look forward to hearing the committee's views on how we can and should achieve these aims in the report, and also the points I've raised this evening, in particular around transport costs, leisure access and fuel poverty. Basingstoke has taken the lead over other districts on the care leavers tax exemption. We now have an opportunity as a council to take support for our care leavers to a significant step further. I'd just like to leave members with one thought, Chairman. I discovered during a conversation recently that when our children and grandchildren are studying for their GCSEs, some care leavers have the added burden and are in early discussions at 16 about where they will actually be living once they leave care at 18. Most young people don't have to contemplate decisions like that at 16 at such a crucial time. These young adults need all the support we can give them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Westbrook. We have no public speakers tonight, so I will open up to questions for officers. Anybody? Councillor Cousins.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can we just come back on to Councillor Westbrook first? Sorry.
I don't know if anybody got any questions for Councillor Westbrook, but certainly the three areas which he raised, which is our transport, leisure and fuel poverty, I think it would be really helpful to hear the committee's views on. You know, I'm not saying that I have all the answers, and certainly we're not saying that we have all the answers, and it would be really interesting to hear what the committee's views are. As Councillor Westbrook rightly says, we led the way, if you like, in having the council tax discount exemption for them. I know that because I was chair of EPH at the time when that went forward, and that's been really good to see. And thank you to Councillor Westbrook for his work on that, because you were the councillor who pushed that forward, and that's been a really positive piece of work. On the transport piece, it would be interesting to hear members' views, and certainly conscious that we are not the lead transport authority, but that doesn't mean that there's not a support package that could be put in place in partnership with Hampshire County Council. On the leisure point, I know on page 38, it's something which officers are more than willing to explore, and if this committee are happy, then they will have a conversation with the Leisure Trust around potential concessionary rates, so people in care, children in care, already get those rates, and whether that could be extended to care leavers is something that we could talk about. And on fuel poverty, I'm open to committee suggestions.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, portfolio holder officers, and also thank you to my Mike as well, my fellow ward councillor, for coming along and speaking tonight. And picking up those 3 points, certainly with transport, yeah, I think we're talking about at the moment around 50 young people, give or take. It shouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility that we can help them in some way, manner, shape or form. Even as a worst case scenario, we do a sort of tailed proposition where in year 1 it's a 100% reduction and we slowly drag that down. That might be something that is perhaps more palatable as opposed to finding something straight out of the bat. 2.4.15 where it talks about leisure, and yet we talk about the Aquadrome and Tadley Pool. Perhaps we could add the Basingstoke Sports Centre to that as worth approaching and asking. And then in regards to fuel poverty, I note that the Children's Society have a research document called Energy Boost, which looks specifically at that issue. And perhaps we need to think a little bit outside of the box in that. Maybe we look to team up with an energy provider to not only give some advice and guidance to care leavers who are looking for an energy supplier, and ultimately, or certainly from their research, it shows that care leavers are going on the prepaid sticks, and that's probably not the best way forward for them to go. Indeed, it's probably not the best way forward for most people to go, but some support guidance in direct debit, quarterly billing, all the rest of it, but even perhaps setting up some kind of discounted tariff that we could have a conversation with them about that points them in the right direction, I think could be well worth exploring.
Does anybody want to answer that?
Thank you very much for that, and noted on those points in terms of exploring further. Probably worth noting in relation to energy bills that we work really closely with Citizens Advice, and they provide an awful lot of advice and guidance for people who are struggling with bills and in terms of putting some plans in place. So that's something that we would always be encouraging young people to access as well.
Councillor Cousins. Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think this is an interesting piece of work. It's also a really very important area. There are some areas in the report which I think are just a little bit low on detail, which I personally would have welcomed more information. So when we talk about having pathways and options for housing support, what exactly does that mean? What options are there? What pathways are there? I think that unless we have that level of detail, it's quite difficult for us to think about what other suggestions might be taken. And similarly, with thinking about those issues around their social needs, and we say that social services are there to provide support, but we also know that social services are being cut back. So exactly what kind of support are we providing for social needs, and to avoid things social support, combating loneliness for these young people that are often coming out of one type of accommodation where perhaps they might have had friendships, going into another where they'll be quite lonely. And from my own personal experience of dealing with young people on apprenticeships and training skills and looking after these sorts of young people, a common problem is that they've often been absenters from the education system. Their social behaviours, relationship forming and so on are often quite immature. And so you might be looking at an 18-year-old that actually has the social skills and the integration skills of a 12-year-old, because maybe that was the last time they really properly engaged in the education system. And my own experience of that is that these young people and care leavers do fall significantly and substantially between lots of different services. So in fact, the training and apprenticeship services are not geared up and are not funded to support those additional needs. We know that cuts are happening in all sorts of other areas, social services and so on. And so my concern is, how do those needs, to say that those services exist is fine, but exactly what's being done and how is it being done. I think I would be really interested to have much more information about the housing element and the social support for these young people. Often have had very distressing lives. I'm really pleased that they can come to anywhere within the Hampshire County Council, because sometimes they have developed associations in a different town and they benefit from being able to leave those towns and have the concept of fresh start, but that brings with it additional support needs. And I think that the isolation and loneliness for young people is extremely difficult for them to cope with and deal with, particularly in a world where Facebook likes and being popular and all the rest of it is regarded as significantly an important thing. So it's light on detail, this report on that, and I'd like to see more of that. I'd also like to see some assurance about the grants, because I've been searching today to try to see whether or not the grants are actually protected in our budgets. What I get is the sense that grants are being reduced, but there's not very much detail as to which grants and where. And so I'd like some assurance that these grants that we're mentioning to young persons counselling, YCMA and citizens advice are actually not being affected and not being cut. Otherwise it diminishes our ability to provide services to those young people. Sorry, it's quite a bit.
Lots of very good points there. Does anybody want to answer?
Can I ask Rachel to jump in on the housing points, because I know she'll have all of the information on that. So. Okay, we'll go to Kim first in terms of Hampshire and the social support services, and then go to Rachel for housing.
So this will just touch on the housing in terms of the transition through. Is that okay with you? Yeah.
So in terms of the accommodation support that's offered to care leavers, for our care leavers who are already living in foster care, so during that transition phase when we're starting to look at their future with them, at 15 years, 9 months is when we start that transition planning. Obviously, for care leavers who are in foster care, we are really encouraging them to remain in those placements post-18, and that falls under our staying put policy, and that supports young people to stay put with their foster carers between the years of 18 and 21. So that is kind of a primary start point, but obviously lots of our young people may not be in foster care at that point, or may be seeking different opportunities for themselves. Obviously, lots of decisions may have been taken out of their hand throughout their childhoods. They may have been removed from their families as a result of a court order, and often they see 18 as a point for them to start making decisions. So we do really strongly encourage the staying put option. We think it's a fantastic offer for our care leavers, and we transition that to a more supported lodgings arrangement, because obviously we need to recognise that that young person is now an adult in that placement where formerly they were a child. So really supporting that transition for both the young people and the foster carers, because it is a transition for everybody, and obviously young people are recognising their rights at that stage. Our next kind of offer, if staying put isn't appropriate for a young person, would be our supported lodging schemes. And obviously, as Hampshire, we procure and commission those services, and that would be our immediate offer to young people. So that would be living in a home arrangement with a supported lodgings carer. Those can be various placements. Some of them will be family type arrangements. It might be a single person or a couple, but it's finding that right match in terms of who that young person will feel comfortable living with, and obviously accessing some support from the agency that we're working with in providing that placement. And again, you know, supported lodging schemes do provide a positive stopgap, you know, between those ages of 18 and 21, where obviously we're seeking to transition young people into full independent living. But obviously, as you can see, kind of going through those options, there are numerous transitions through that point. So they may leave their foster placement at 18, they may leave a supported lodgings placement at 19, 20, 21, and then they're moving on to their independent living, which is then which kind of is us working with our partners in housing, but also our young people accessing privately rented accommodation. And obviously, in terms of kind of the factors that need to be considered, it is about the universal credit rates that kind of support their housing element and the caps that apply to under 25-year-olds, which often means that we're looking at shared accommodation provision for them in private accommodation. So we are working with partners, and it's been a really fantastic opportunity to work with Sam and Rachel, you know, to develop those partnerships from our perspective. And obviously it's kind of continuing that good work, really, but kind of recognising there are also young people that we're supporting who have aspirations to go to university, and how we support them to achieve that. There's lots of research happening now currently about the barriers that impact on young people accessing university or staying at university. And again, just thinking about, you know, when you move to university, you're often taken by your parents. You'll see all your, you know, fellow people you're living with arriving with their parents, and you don't have that necessarily, and already from day one feeling sort of different. And that's where our personal advisors come in, and they're fantastic, and we act as that good parent, you know, in the best capacity we can. We've had fantastic stories of personal advisors driving a young person up to Liverpool to take them to their first day of university, and to kind of do that work and settle them in. But I think, you know, even in university, it's about coming home during those times when you can't stay at university during that first year, and what that accommodation option looks like for that young person, and those kind of things. I mean, we have fantastic carers who maintain links with our young people and act as a cushion of support, but actually that's not always what the young person is seeking, or it's not always available, because sometimes those arrangements break down because young people are used to relationships ending, and they find it very difficult to have those enduring relationships, and they may sometimes seek to break those down because it's difficult for them to work through that transition. So I think there is lots of good work in terms of accommodation, but I think, you know, we have a robust local offer in Hampshire which we can circulate following the meeting, but I think the multiple areas that we're involved in, I think you said the detail, it touches all branches of their lives, really. So it is a really important area, but obviously you can update on the housing offer in Basingstoke.
So as a district authority, we'd get involved. Shall I do this one? Sorry. We'd get involved quite often for move on from that kind of accommodation. So your supported lodgings, set up the Pines, which is a local group home setting, and there's properties in the community that are accessed by people leaving care, but also just generically for your under 21s, under 22s, I think it is, isn't it? And we then work with the young people and the support providers to ensure that there's not just a cliff edge when they reach that age, and that there's a move on option. That could be into further supported accommodation through the normal social inclusion pathway, or into private rented accommodation, or through the general needs housing register. So it's all around really early days communication as frequently as we can. Any issues around eviction or preventing eviction, we get involved and work with the young people. I think as well it's important, we've got our social inclusion partnership here in Basingstoke and Dean, and the support providers for those schemes that Kim mentioned are a part of that partnership. So there's very much a consistent approach when young people may move into the other services that may be focused more on, you know, your generic offer. So there's, you know, the training there around trauma-informed care, the resilience and understanding the ACEs that Councillor Westbrook mentioned, and the experiences people have gone through. The staff across the board, whether they're in that young person specific service or in any other services, have had that training, and you should get that understanding and that consistency of offer. So and that goes for our housing team as well. So I think it's just looking around communication, better partnership working. So the pathways there, we've got joint working protocols in place. It's just understanding where those pinch points are and making sure no one's falling through the gaps at points where people could be particularly vulnerable to, so, you know, and the transition of care.
Councillor Tiller, do you have anything else to ask?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I mean, one thing I suppose would be about whether we're satisfied with the speed and the timeliness and of links between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean in terms of knowing about everything. And then obviously there's the I'm always slightly worried as well that we do have a whole group of young people who aren't actually necessarily in formal care. And indeed, because I think that it is the intention, isn't it, to take less young people into care, that group of people will grow, who actually, because they are still in, shall we say, possibly even more difficult situations, because they're living in family homes where they may not be getting any kind of support at all, and therefore don't benefit from any of this. So I always worry about that, and our stated intention to reduce the number of young people that go into care. I know we don't have a legal obligation to them, but I think as a society we probably do. So I think more generally, are we actually having timely links between the two authorities? And obviously, if we're lauding the fact that we provide grants to organisations who can support young people, I do want to know that those grants aren't under pressure.
Can I just bring Mike in on that point?
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm the local team manager for the Care Leavers team in Basingstoke and Test Valley, so I can speak locally about what we do. The team of personal advisors are very, very aware of the accommodation situations relating to all their young people, and we currently have funding through the Department of Local Government and Communities to have specialist housing workers. So they work on a couple of levels around that. One is the prevention. So working with providers like YMCA locally. So if there's a rent arrears issue comes up, or if there's a risk of a termination, notice of termination, those workers will go in alongside the personal advisors and negotiate an extension to that termination of notice, or a plan on around rent arrears. And the other thing we do, because we've been very aware over the years around young people reaching 18 and a half and deciding they want to live on their own, and your point about isolation is very real, because they may be able to budget, they may be able to manage everything, but that moment they shut the door in the evening when they've finished college, that's when it becomes very, very difficult for them. So the homelessness prevention work we've got in Basingstoke is doing a lot of tenancy support around that, just to make sure that when they're in, they can get all the support with their budgeting and managing, but also accessing those additional local support services outside of office hours, if you like. So it's knowing what's available, what's going on. So we're working on the isolation element of things as well. Less and less, we're getting young people moving into their own accommodation at that 18, 19 age, because we've recognised they aren't ready for it. So it's those longer term plans, as Kim has said, about the staying put, about supported accommodation, and then those longer term move on plans, alongside Rachel and the rest of the team here. Thank you.
I think as well, just with the introduction of the Homeless Reduction Act, that's formalised, although we've always had good relationships, it formalised for a lot of public bodies that the duty to refer. So just making sure that there's a legal obligation now for that information to be shared as soon as possible. So that's, although it was already happening, it's kind of cemented that.
Can I just ask the Hampshire officers briefly, you mentioned the staying put policy. Is that a default policy for children leaving care? How does that go forward?
I think it's our starting point. So as we're planning for a move on, or hopefully not planning for a move on, once a young person has a personal advisor in place at 15 years, 9 months, 16-year-olds, we'll start those conversations with foster carers about whether it's going to be realistic for them to stay post 18. If it's not, we can start planning really early. But our starting point, if it's been a good, solid and supportive foster care placement, is we'll look to continue the staying put policy.
Thank you. Oh, grants. I think on grants, and if they are protected, I think I'll have to take that one away and come back to you. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, and I don't know the answer, and I'll take it away.
Councillor Kinnear.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I found this report very interesting to read, so thank you for producing this. I've just got a couple of questions. Obviously, the Hampshire County Council provide the personal advisor until they're 25. And as we've all said, it's so important that Hampshire County Council liaise with the local council so that person does not get lost in the system, because I see that they only have a personal advisor if they take up the offer, but not all of them do. So what happens to the people who don't take up the offer? Do they then just disappear or get lost off the system? I don't know about that one. I see that there are only 5 that have council tax relief from the council. Does one presume that everyone else is not in a home? They're obviously, well, hopefully not homeless, but for 5 of them only to receive council tax relief, that's not many of them. I'd be interested to know, do many of these care leavers take up on these trainee course, sort of 6 months long or apprenticeships? I fully support what Councillor Cousins and Councillor Westbrook said about travel concessions, because obviously you want to get them into employment, and some of them then can't afford to get to work, and it's a vicious circle. I'm also a firm believer that leisure facilities are so important to keep, for mental health and everything. So I really do think any concessions possible for any sports facilities is a very positive move forward. Thank you, Chair.
I think if we take those in turn, firstly from my side briefly on the council tax relief, the council tax support scheme for those young people would only kick into place if they had a council tax bill, so that would rely on them having their own accommodation and not being in another set of accommodations. That would only be if they were in their own housing, if you like, and it also does rely on them applying for that relief. Now, Sam's just told me that we do encourage them to apply for that relief, and we do tell them that that relief is available, but it does rely on them applying for that relief, and it does rely on them having a council tax account. So just because there's X number of care leavers in the borough and only X number are on the council tax relief scheme doesn't mean that people aren't getting it. It just means that they might not have a council tax bill. On the what happens if people don't engage, I'm going to defer to Kim.
So we are very persistent in our attempts to engage our young people, and obviously sort of starting that relationship off from the 15-year 9 months when the personal advisors come alongside the social worker. So at that point the young person would have both an allocated social worker and an allocated personal advisor. So we're trying to build that relationship as soon as possible so that when that child and family social worker ceases their involvement at 18, the PA's actually laid some foundations to that relationship. And we are extremely lucky within our personal advisors in that we do have a very stable kind of working cohort. So actually, in terms of staff retention, it's really positive within our care leavers team and in Mike's team particularly. So obviously, some of our care leavers will have had the same person from 15 and they've known for 10 years, and Mike probably share personal examples of that, which I think is really positive. I think that sometimes our young people are on an elastic band and sometimes they might stretch away from us, but our hope is that they bounce back. So we try not to lose that connection, but we also recognise that at points sometimes young people want distance from services. We do try to make the feel of a personal advisor feel different to having an allocated social worker. It is a different relationship because they are working with an adult. And our young people often say that it does feel different in a positive way. So that's a real kind of, positive example. And we would really, try to encourage young people to stay in contact with us. And we would write to them annually if they were ceasing to engage with us as a minimum to kind of keep that kind of connection there. But actually, with text messaging, WhatsApp, we're quite creative in our ways of communicating, and actually sort of being there for when they need us and then responding at that time. But, some people do go through a point where they say, actually, I've had enough of service intervention and I want to step back from that. But actually, we find that to be quite a small number in reality, and I think that actually we may have a gap of contact, but actually we will still be persistent in that and we'll send those text messages, how are you, hope you're doing okay, and just sort of building those relationships. But we also have to recognise that as adults, if they are very clear that they don't want that contact from us, we have to respect that. But it's in a small number of cases that kind of contact would lapse.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Just to give a couple of local examples. I was in a meeting yesterday with some staying put carers, and they used the phrase "loosening the strings in a nice way," which I thought was a really nice way of putting what we try to do. Because as young people are approaching 21 or 25, we need to be confident, and they need to be confident that they can do things themselves, and whether that's a new relationship or whether that's parenthood or starting a job or going back to university, we will always be there for them. All the young people we work with know how to get in touch with us if they need to, and quite often a starting point would be a former foster carer, or the young person themselves getting in touch with a personal advisor. So we will make an informal contact then, but then there's a more formal referral process that they understand that they need to go through. So I think we're pretty much belt and braces on that. And as Kim said, some will reach 21 and just say, we're off. And as adults with capacity, we have to respect that. Locally, I mean, just to give a couple of examples, one young woman who came from Eritrea at 16 is finishing the final year of a nursing degree in Reading, and another one who has been in the YMCA for a while, has recently moved into a shared accommodation and has had lots of support in getting that set up. And they're both now over 21, so that support is continued to ensure that when they're ready, we're ready to be there to support them and move them on. Thank you.
Councillor Vaux.
Yes, a very interesting report. Thank you very much. It's always difficult to know what to put in and what to leave out in reports, isn't it? So it's not an easy thing. So there were just 3 areas that I wanted to ask a little bit more about. Well, to ask, but and one where I'd like to just lend some support. On the housing, we've talked a lot about it already, but I just wanted to get a sense of if there are young people who want to stay in the borough, are we able to provide them? Have we got the housing resource that they need? It's always a difficult balance, isn't it? But are we able to accommodate those, or do they have to move away? And on the health side, Councillor Westbrook, I think, talked about this a little. The report does talk about the mental health need, but it doesn't talk very much about what we do to support that across both councils. And as a kind of a parent role, I would be asking, what about dentists? What about GP registration? What about all of that? Because that's what we do as parents, is we make sure that our kids access health services when they should and get registered in the right place and all the rest of it. And I just wondered how that was managed. Is it something the borough does? Is it something the county does? Or is it what the advisors do, or what? And so my bit about lending support, I think that the report briefly touches on the possibility of supporting a subsidised bus that travel. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I think it's a small number, isn't it? 50. I think it's something that surely we should be able to afford to do. And I wonder about expanding that to trains. You can get for £30, I think it is a year, you can get a young person's up to 25, 30% off most rail travel. I mean, I would like to think that that's something that we could consider as well.
I'll bring Mike in on the health, presumably.
And the transport.
And the transport.
Right. With the transport point of view, we recognise how much of a trap it can be financially for young people. So, and also recognising that by not being able to travel, it can be prohibitive. So what we will do for young people who are starting employment is we will fund transport until they've been paid. For young people at college, if they're at college 2 or 3 days a week, we'll buy them monthly bus passes because it works out cheaper to buy a monthly one than 3 days a week. And then that allows that social aspect to go out at weekends, to see friends, to see sometimes family members, because we recognise, again, going back to the isolation and the mental health side of things, we recognise by doing that locally, we can make improvements and we can help. So they're just to pick up those 2 points.
I mean, I'm very conscious that as a parent, that is what we would be doing. We would be supporting young people to be able to be as independent as possible without the financial drain. So what you've talked about, is that a policy, is that written into a policy that you're able to do that? I mean, what funds do you draw on in order to be able to afford to do that? Is it county, is it borough? How does it work?
That'll be county funds.
Just, Mike, before you start, did you want to touch on the healthcare point? Oh, sorry, Kim.
So obviously the health of our young people is a real priority for us. We have at County recently employed a designated doctor for a lead for care leavers. So that is a post that's helping us think creatively with our local partners about enhancing health access for our young people. I think, you know, you touched on a brilliant point, you know, how many young people will ask their parent, even up to their mid-20s probably, to try and ring the doctor, get them a GP appointment. And actually for our young people, it's about when they do ring, being able to be offered that appointment, you know, being asked to wait a month, you know, for a young person to think about all the things that are going on in their life and prioritise that can be a real challenge. So I think we were looking at, you know, are there ways that GP surgeries could flag care leavers on their notes that actually if they are ringing up for that first time to get an appointment, or they're reaching out for that health appointment, that they're welcomed, you know, on that phone call and into that practice, because we think those initial contacts really set the tone, and we know that if they get a knock at that first interaction, that can really set them back. So I think from a county perspective, you know, that is something that we're really keen to promote, and obviously, you know, from a borough perspective, you know, how we can continue to progress that locally is something we're really interested to explore, because it is a massive issue. Obviously for our looked after children, we do have healthcare plans for young people up to 18. We track their dental appointments. We offer a health screening. But again, it's about young people having the option to opt out. So obviously in their teenage years, they don't necessarily have to engage with those things, and we need to respect that. But it's actually different offering those things in a supported living environment to then that young person actually going to register at a practice or ringing up the GP themselves. Because even, you know, our foster carers are our parents to our young people, and they will be, you know, making those calls as all parents do, and it's, you know, how do we get them ready to do that independently? So I think it is, you know, an area that we would really like to grow, and I think particularly in terms of mental health, because we know that a lot of our young people's needs have a trauma basis, they may not have a mental health basis, and therefore where does that support come from? And obviously in terms of turning 18, they would be accessing adult mental health provision, and obviously in terms of kind of the provision that's available, it is clearly linked to mental health diagnosis, as opposed to necessarily the trauma informed support that young people need. So it is certainly an area that we're keen to promote access for.
Delicate subject, sexual health. I think particularly for young women, it's quite a difficult one to access. So do you have a particular approach to encourage both young women and young men to feel that they can safely manage their sexual health? And I think the other thing that it might be worth us thinking about with our health partners is young people today want instant access to everything. Phoning up the GP and waiting for an appointment for a month just doesn't work. Yeah, true. Now, what's happening in a lot of places in the country is more virtual primary care. And I know in London, just from my own family, it works really, really well. For a lot of things, you know, they want a prescription for something that's actually a regular prescription or something, and it can be managed very well instantly. So I think it is also about, I would encourage us as county councils and borough councils to talk to our health partners and encourage that from our primary care services.
And so absolutely, obviously sexual health being a priority area for our young people, obviously kind of having those kind of relationships with the personal advisors developing at an early stage, we're hoping to build that trust in the relationship so that they can obviously be talking to their personal advisors about any issues that they might have. But I think, sometimes life can be very chaotic for our young people, sadly. And obviously we touched upon educational outcomes previously and all the things that we're really focused and driven to improve. But we know that life can be very challenging, and those things can sometimes not be prioritised in the way we would want as adults for those young people and by those young people. So I think anything that we can do to build those relationships, improve that access, we'd be really keen to develop.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick? Oh, sorry. Do you want to?
Yes, I was just going to ask Rachel to answer the housing point that Councillor Vox mentioned.
Thank you. I mean, I think in terms of post-18 placements, we very much look at options within Basingstoke and Dean, and that is depending on what the young person wants and obviously and what's available at the time. We do very much look at the local resource. So Mike mentioned YMCA. That's quite a natural progression for people leaving care and to move into there, but also private rent within the area, and the general supported pathway. So your Mary Rose Court group homes, the homes in the community as well. So we monitor how many people who aren't necessarily care leavers now, but maybe have had contact with the care system in the past to understand their background and how best they might be supported. So in terms of the post-18 work, that's very much done in Basingstoke and Dean. And we talked briefly about the supported lodgings and that setup in terms of you're always in need of more families, and that can be. Do you want to just say something about where those placements are? Would that be?
And so obviously we have a county-wide kind of procurement and obviously really focused on where the young people want to be living, and obviously actively working with those providers to promote people coming forward to be supported lodgings carers, because we do have supported lodgings and low lodgings, so whereby there's a differentiation between the support needed. So I think as a local option to try and maybe promote people considering whether that's an option for them in terms of being able to rent a room to a young person, that could be something locally to promote more options in this district, and I know that would be something we would be keen to do. And I think sometimes people don't know that necessarily they can do that, and they have got a room and they've thought about renting it out, but actually might benefit from some more information around that. So we can certainly from our procurement point of view make use of the local contacts that you have.
I was just interested to know if you do anything beyond 25, just so you can measure what you've done and see if it works and see if you could do anything better.
So presently our contact does cease at 25, but obviously, if a young, an adult at that time made contact with us, I think that sometimes we have had adults post 25 who've contacted personal advisors who they've known for a long time, and we would absolutely welcome that contact and having that conversation. I suppose in terms of kind of tracking of our kind of progress of our young people, at Hampshire we take that very seriously. We're kind of monitored by Ofsted in terms of our performance around indicators on suitable accommodation, on young people in education, training and employment. So those are kind of big drive for us. So, and we monitor them every month in terms of the numbers in each district. And obviously we've said moving forward with some of the interventions we might be able to create through our partnership working, we would be seeing improvements in those kind of numbers that we, are closely monitoring all the time. So I think in the long term, that's what we would kind of be hoping to enable us to see that process. And obviously young people and adults coming back and sharing their stories, which I think we do get that, and then that does happen. But I think in terms of a kind of data kind of perspective, that is something that we heavily track. And obviously we've talked about looking at seeing if we can see some of the measures and outcomes in terms of kind of allowing people to reach their best potential.
We also then look at it from a housing perspective, maybe a bit further down the line, so people maybe who are over 30 or 40, just understanding the real knock-on effects if you have had contact with the care system and maybe then lost touch with support services that come back. If there's any themes emerging, that there might be some indication of where we could be targeting some more upstream support and prevention work, even for those who may not have been considered care leavers for a long time but actually were in care, and just understanding whether there's any themes coming through, and then putting that back into training, into partnerships, and into some of the prevention focused work. So.
Councillor Kinnear.
Just briefly, I've just got a couple of ideas. Thinking about leisure and mental health, and I was just thinking in the borough we've got lots to offer. We've got local activity parks, we've got museums, we've got theatres. Is there any harm in approaching them to ask if they can offer concessions at all? There's no reason why not. That's all part of important culture, and also may lead to jobs or whatever. And the other thing is having a driving test is a skill. Is there anything, is it worth approaching a driving centre to say, would you give concessions for driving lessons? Because they're fearfully expensive and they may not have someone who's offering to go in a car with them. So that's an idea as a skill for later in life.
Can I bring Mike in on that?
Yeah, sorry, it's on the driving lessons point. As an authority, we do subsidise driving lessons for young people up to £200. The way we try to do it is match fund it with a young person, because these days £200 doesn't buy you a lot of lessons and doesn't give you much of a chance of passing. So we try and match fund it with a young person, so we potentially get £400 worth of lessons out of our £200. But if you know of any driving instructors who want to offer subsidies, then I'm more than happy to have that conversation locally.
I think that's really helpful to know that there is a base, and it's a base level, but there is a base level of support there. I think that's really helpful.
Councillor Jones.
What I was going to ask about originally, and this is the main question, I've got another one after, but healthy eating, cooking, because if we're all honest, especially us blokes, when we was at home, our mothers taught us to cook, and when you're a teenager and in your early 20s you may not want to do it, and years ago, no matter where you worked virtually, there was a canteen, so you got hot food, and McDonald's weren't about in my day. I just wonder how you go about educating people to actually cook a meal which is cheaper than buying it, a ready meal, actually making a meal.
So obviously in terms of kind of preparing our young people for independence, we're thinking of that from the point that a young person comes into care. So we're thinking about their permanency and their exit from care. So our foster carers do a great job in trying to skill our young people up in that area. But they are also sometimes teenagers who might be more or less motivated around kind of being encouraged in those areas. I think, healthy eating and budgeting is a significant factor for our young people. Their personal allowance rate is £57.90 per week, and from which they have to provide their food and their toiletries. So young people are living off small means. So obviously kind of being able to cook is fundamental in being able to provide for themselves. In terms of Hampshire, we've recently looked at a sort of pilot project around group work, so looking at an independence programme. But actually what we know is that initially, to kind of get those independence work happening, we need to look at the young person's resilience, because that's kind of fundamental, because there can be lots of kind of activities and things going on, but we need to get people in the frame of mind to be able to attend those. But I do think it's a good point, they are budgeting from a small amount of money, and obviously in a way that other young people are not doing at that age, ordinarily. Obviously the personal advisors will do sessional work around independence, but obviously we are having contact with them every 2 months and more so if needed. But actually, like you're talking about, it's quite a lot of support that gets to get to a young person living at the way that they can be independently. We are also working with our virtual school and looking at our personal education planning, which is a process that happens within school. So kind of really tailoring some of the targets in school, looking at money management, because we need all young people to be better managing their money. So how can we kind of enhance those offers? But I think particularly around food and healthy eating, we do know that, our young people are often eating convenience foods and those kind of things, because it's about, their ability to cook and those kind of things. You know, our foster carers do great work in preparing young people, but not all young people are coming from a stable fostering background. They may have come into care at around 16, 17, and actually we're playing catch up with those young people. So I think the work that our foster carers do in getting young people ready is fantastic, but not all of them benefit from having that length of time. So yeah, I think it's a really great point, and I think if there was anything locally, you know, working with kind of in terms of kind of other providers that budgetary fundings that we could look at those kind of things creatively would be a brilliant idea.
Really concerned when we talk about private rented. I really get annoyed, if I'm honest, because we're putting people into private rented that have not gone through the system. It's expensive. And surely, as a council, and perhaps county council as well, should be making more noise about this. If we're not provided enough homes, and that's not your fault, I'm going to go at you, but we should be making more noise that we want more social housing, because all we're doing is offsetting something. And if someone's on a low wage, something has to give somewhere if they got a high rent. Either they don't go out as much, or they don't do this, or they don't pay the rent. And I think we as councillors and county councillors, we've got one here, Mike, we should be making more noise about it, because we seem to be accepting that it's acceptable for some people to pay more money in rent than what other people are. But that's just on my hobby horse.
I did listen, Councillor Jones, and I appreciate it is a hobby horse of yours, and that's fine. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Just a comment from me, really. My parents were foster carers, so I thought I knew a little bit about children in the care system. But reading this report and listening to you talk, I've realised that really I don't. And it's a very, very complex issue. And it's actually been really reassuring to hear you talk tonight, because it shows how good an understanding you have got, how passionate you are for these young people, and that you're doing some really, really good work here. So just wanted to say thank you, and that it's been really good to hear about what you're doing. And I can see how much you really care about this. So yeah, that's it.
Do I have any more questions? So I'll sum up. Well, first of all, exactly what Councillor Carruthers said. You know, well done. It's great to see Basingstoke and Dean and Hampshire County Council working together as a partnership. It's good also to see that our care leavers are being looked after beyond the age of 18 as well. So that's quite good. I think there was one comment with about lack of detail. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to say, and I prefer to sort of say, or it's fair to say, there's lots of detail which creates more questions. And we have brought a lot of questions to you today. So to close up, can I say thank you, and can I ask you for a repeat visit, maybe in a year's time or something, just to give us an update on what's going on? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, we can discuss about when the most appropriate time to come back is, but in principle, yes, more than happy to do that. Certainly the points that we've taken away are around the concessionary rates for transport, whether that's bus/rail cards, what form that takes, but we'll look into that a bit further. On the leisure offering, making sure that we're adding Basingstoke Sports Centre to that list and other providers, as Councillor Kinnear said, that's really important. On the energy boost point that Councillor Westbrook raised, I think that's a really interesting one, and as I say, I don't know the answer, but I think it'll be really interesting to see what we can do with other organisations such as Citizens Advice around signposting people to the right information, because you know, these organisations that work with us do have the right information, and it's making sure that we enable young people to be able to access that. And there are a few points which I said I'd take away, and I'll get back to members on those in due course. Thank you. Oh, can I just say thank you very much to Kim and Mike for attending. It's very much appreciated, and thank you very much to Sam and Rachel as well.
Thank you. So I'll just move on to item 7 of the agenda to confirm and agree the items on the committee work schedule or work programme. We have on the 18th of March an update on the ice rink. So we're all looking forward to that. And also football pitch fees. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a separate subject, but yeah. And then we've got further items, property investment policy, maintaining leased buildings. I haven't had anything from Councillor Isaac from that, so I don't know when that's planned for. But I have spoken to officers about the bin and broom service. They want a year's worth of information to come in before they make comment on it and present it to us. So that leads on to the 24th of June. So Councillor Regan.
Why a year? Why not 6 months?
What I was told was all their information is based on a yearly forecast, and they're still setting up bits and pieces, so it wouldn't be sufficient to compare with previous years at a 6 months level. That's what I was informed, and I've agreed to that.
Is he not kicking it into the long grass?
They want a year's information, so I mean that's physically.
So when does the year finish then?
They didn't tell me, but it falls in for the June 24th CEP.
June. Oh, well, if I'm elected,
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we did talk when we were talking about the bin and broom service about the need to get the residents' voice. And if we're going to wait for 6 months' worth of data, I think that's 6 months' worth of adequate time to go out and do some surveys with residents about what they think about their services, so that we don't have to wait for another 6 months whilst we do a survey after those figures come in.
Okay, I'll bring that back to the officers. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Kinnear.
Sorry, I've just got one question. When you were going through that, on page 10, 33/15, the executive director agreed to email an update to the committee in February, and that was regarding the ice rink.
So I don't believe we've got a CEP meeting in February.
No, we haven't. But I thought we were going to have an update, an email update. Am I right? Sorry, that's what it says.
I think I'd probably agree to give an update if there was something to update on prior to the March report that we're planning to bring. But because everything that yeah,
and then agreed to email an update to the committee in February. I mean, maybe it's not needed.
Yeah, and I think it was on the basis if there was something to give you an update upon. The work programme that we've got at the moment with regards to the surveys and developing the business case, working with both the building owner, the leisure park developer, and with the current operator owner of the ice rink. We won't have anything to update on that work stream before March because of the amount of time it will take. But if something should, heaven forbid, happen, then we'll bring an update.
Okay, so that's all I've got for March. I have nothing beyond March because obviously we've got the all-out elections. So the current planned work groups, CCG task and finish groups, there's going to be an update as requested at the last meeting. Officers have been requested to contact the CCG so that the task and finish group can receive the answers to the second part of their submission. And then we've got the CSPO task and finish group, and there's going to be an update. Officers will have been approached for an update on the potential dates for the next meeting, but I can confirm that's 25th. Yeah. Is it 25th?
Yeah.
Yeah, 25th of February. So, and that concludes the meeting. Sorry, yes. Recycling from flats, apartments, scoping group. again, it says a list of potential dates, but that's next week, isn't it? Next Tuesday, on the 4th. And that concludes the CEP meeting for tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.